All right, as it is now 7 o'clock by the official town council chamber clock on the wall, we will call to order the August 17th meeting of the Town of Warren Zoning Board of Review. The first matter is to determine if we have a quorum. So I am here. I am the chairman, Andrew Ellis. To my right is Jason Nystrom, followed by Michael Elves, then Barrett Holby, the vice chairman, David Francis, and Chuck Thibodeau at the end. Mr. Elves is typically an alternate member. However, because we have the absence of one of our regular members, he will be a voting member this evening. And Mr. Francis is also an alternate, and he will be able to vote should any one of the regular members need to recuse themselves on any application. If any application is continued, Mr. Francis would also be eligible to vote should that application be continued and we not have the same 5 members at a present time. He could certainly step in. I will just remind the board members, we have a new audio system. And so to activate your microphone, you need to press the button that says push. And that will then make sure that you are live and able to be heard by all in attendance.
Green light. Yeah, mine's red.
Yeah, so the green light means you're live. The red light means that you're not. And I don't know if there are other colors of lights, but we shall see as we go along. So having established that there is in fact a quorum for this evening's meeting, the first matter on the agenda is to approve the minutes of our previous meeting of July 20th, 2022. Is there any discussion on the minutes, or is there a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Chuck.
Very good. All in favor?
Aye.
The minutes are approved. Before we dive right into the agenda, there are a couple of sort of clerical housekeeping matters we need to resolve. First, I would like to deal with application 2229 and 2230, for which the solicitor has informed us that there is pending legal action.
Mr. Chair, as the board has been made aware that there's a legal dispute over the boundary on this property. Therefore, under Rhode Island general law, the original jurisdiction for Title II real estate is within the Superior Court, who has complete jurisdiction, and not this board. Therefore, this board cannot hear this application at this time. And I would advise the board to continue this matter as it plays out in the court system.
So we will take that as a formal request from the applicant for a continuance
From the town,
from the town.
correct.
So we will be continuing it due to jurisdictional requirements that this is in Superior Court. So we will not be able to hear this application. We will not be able to take any comment on this application at this time.
Mr. Chair, the town would also encourage the parties to talk between now and the next hearing here.
I would request a continuance to the September meeting, just to give an update to the board.
Okay. So is there a motion to continue applications 2229 and 2230 to the September meeting of the board?
I'll make a motion.
And
To
is there a
continue.
second?
I'll second it.
And we will have the condition that the town encourages the parties to speak with one another in hopes of resolving this matter prior to the next meeting. All in favor of continuing? Aye. Any opposed? The motion is passed. So applications 22, 29, and 2230 are continued to the September meeting.
We have a question.
Yes, you,
So you're not taking any comments? at this
Nope.
time?
nothing at this time. We cannot hear it.
We can't even talk, we can't discuss that.
Nope. It's not in our jurisdiction.
It's up to the courts.
So if you're here for that application, you can feel free to leave, or if you'd like to stay and enjoy the rest of this civics lesson for the evening, you're more than welcome. But we cannot hear any comments, any testimony with regard to those applications because they are in Superior Court.
Yeah, I just want to talk to the fact that the possible continued conversation due to the fact of what they're trying, you saw our application, I'm not going to discuss it. It's property, they're trying to, the legal. loopholes.
Again, that's in Superior Court.
That's unfortunate.
You're gonna make your argument to the court.
Discussion. So I want that on record to be
You
said.
might want to retain counsel. but we can-
Next, we have another sort of administrative matter to deal with. Application 22-24 for Blount Realty. The board has been informed that there was a sort of misrepresentation in the lots that were to be noticed as abutters in this matter, and it will have to be re-advertised. So the matter, it appears, will need to be continued until the September meeting. Is that correct, Mr. Solicitor?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Is anyone here for that application? No. So we'll need a motion in order to continue 22-24 to the September meeting so that the process of noticing the abutters can be corrected.
I'll make a motion for application 22-24, Blount Realty Company to continue the meeting till September meeting after the abutters have been notified.
Okay, is there a second?
Second. Oh, sorry.
All in favor of the continuance? Aye. Any opposed? The motion is passed. The application is continued. So we can now dive into the agenda as published. So we will begin with old business. First on the agenda for old business is application 2211 Vlad Stinga, owner and applicant, 10 to 12 Norbert Street, plat map 3, lot 36, request for a dimensional variance under 3277 to install an HVAC unit with less than required side yard setbacks on a legal, non-conforming lot in the R6 zoning district. And I will note that Mr. Francis is recusing on this application. So the 5 individuals sitting in the dais will be the 5 voting members. Mr. Stinga, would you like to come forward, please? Before I ask you to speak, I will note that a public site visit was conducted at the site at 5:30 this evening so that the board and any members of the public interested could view the conditions present on site and receive any information relevant to the location of this HVAC in the setback. So Mr. Stinga, good evening. You could basically recap your position on why this variance is needed for these HVAC units.
So the HVAC units have been installed by my contractor initially without pulling the proper permits, which you did afterwards. Upon inspection from the town, they noticed that the units are installed properly. They're installed in the right place, the appropriate distances from the house as far as the requirements from the manufacturer go. The only problem was that they're too close to the property line. On the previous meeting back in April, if I remember, you asked if there's any other position where the units can be placed. I talked to my contractor. I provided texts from him to the building inspector, where he said that that is pretty much the only position where the units can be. If you were to move them on any other side of the house, they would basically be ineffective. So that is pretty much the only.
And I will note that on the site visit, we observed the placement of the units and we reviewed the distance that the piping from the units needs to run in order to service the second and third floor units. And we were able to observe that the location where they're currently installed was in compliance with the limits on what that equipment can handle, and that any alternative location would have exceeded the limits of that particular unit. We also made personal observations of the amount of noise generated by the units, and the board members can comment on their findings with regard to the requirement that no noise over 65 decibels be emitted at the property line. So I was asked if any board members have any findings of fact that they observed at the site visit, if they'd like to contribute to the discussion.
This is Mr. Nystrom. I'll say regarding the decibels, while I'm not a decibel reader myself, and as a layperson of my own personal experience of doing the site visit, we heard the unit while it kicked on. It was very quiet. I go so as far to say that the units were quieter than your classic window-based unit. Regarding the placement of the units, there was some indication that where they were placed is their placement is the least relief that would be needed to effectuate an efficient use of the ducting, exterior ductwork. And also viewing the street and looking at the previous time this was before us, there was some discussion about whether these units could be mounted to the wall above ground, while that would still require a variance. That was an option that had been discussed. And based on the property directly to the east, essentially the air conditioning units would still be in front of the windows of the second floor unit on the eastward property. Regarding some discussion about mounting these units to the roof, it's a very narrow street. There's a lot of power lines. Getting a bucket truck in there, trying to get that to be done, it seems like it would be very cumbersome and would be a major inconvenience to have that done.
For maintenance
Yes.
too.
Yes, Mr. Holby?
I'm sorry, I was gonna just add for maintenance as well.
Yeah, so the location where they're currently installed affords ready access for maintenance. If they were to be installed higher up on the building, maintenance would be very difficult or impossible. We also noted that the distance from the structure to the units was the minimum necessary because the units require airflow on all sides, so they cannot be butted up tight to the exterior wall of the house. And given the very narrow property line right there, we observed that the installed location appeared to be the least amount of relief necessary. Any other comments from the board before we entertain public comment?
I noticed that when I went into the backyard about 20 feet away, they were almost impossible to hear. So the sound, again, has been stated already, was almost negligible. And if you stood in the road noise from Main Street also basically covered that noise. You couldn't hear it. So it was a lot quieter than I thought it was going to be.
And we should also note that the applicant has submitted the specifications for these units from the manufacturer, and the maximum decibel level indicated by the manufacturer is under that which is allowed by the ordinance. So I would just ask if anyone in the public would like to comment with regard to this application at this time. Seeing no one, we will bring it back to the applicant. Mr. Stinga, do you have any final comments or information you'd like to share with the board before we ask for a motion?
No, just thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Is there any further discussion or question on the part of the board, or is anyone prepared to make a motion on this application?
I can make a motion, Mr. Chair. I just need
Okay.
to misplace my little
Very
agenda.
good. Mr. Nystrom, please go ahead.
All right, I move, this is Mr. Nystrom. I move approval of application number 22-11, Vlad Stinga, owner and applicant, 10-12 Norbert Street, plat map 3, lot 36. Request for dimensional variance under sections 32-77 to install an HVAC unit with less than required side yard setbacks on a legal non-conforming lot in the R6 zoning district. In granting this request for a variance, we find that the hardship is due to the unique characteristics of the subject land or structure, and not to the general characteristics of the surrounding area, and not due to the physical or economic disability of the applicant. As indicated in the site visit, as well as a review of the materials, this is a legal non-conforming lot. The lot lines are very narrow. I'll note that the required side yard setbacks in that area are 10 feet, and the existing structure takes it down to 6. So it clearly is a non-conforming side yard setbacks. We do find that this hardship exists due to the unique characteristics of these narrow lots. We find the hardship is not the result of any prior action of the applicant. It does not result primarily from the desire to realize greater financial gain. We've heard some testimony at the original hearing that the origin or genesis of this project, putting these HVAC units, was to get heat to the second and third floors. Certainly, that's something that those units need to have heating. Mr. Sting has given testimony that he's purchased the property and is just trying to use it so that his tenants can, or people occupying those units can have a good place to live. Third, we find that granting of this variance will not alter the general character of the surrounding area, and the request conforms to the purpose and intent of the Warren zoning ordinance and comprehensive plan. Again, the placement of this HVAC system is relatively compatible. If you go around the town, especially in that part of the town, you'll see many type of similar air conditioning units. And certainly it conforms with the desire to make sure that all the units in that structure are habitable and can have heat in the winter. We find the relief requested is the least relief necessary. Going back to some findings that the board made at the site visit, it was clearly, it was the request as indicated is the least relief necessary for several reasons. The lot lines are very narrow. There's really no other feasible place to place these HVAC condenser units so that they may be easily accessible for maintenance, as well as to maximize the efficiency for the exterior ductwork and piping. And as this is a dimensional variance, were this not to be granted, the hardship would be more than a mere inconvenience. Again, there's been some testimony stated that for this variance not to be granted, there would be essentially no heat to the second and third floor units, which certainly would be more than a mere inconvenience to the residents of that structure. As additional findings, I will memorialize the dimensional requirements. In the R6 zoning district, the required side yard setbacks are 10 feet, existing is 6, and the proposal, as indicated, is less than 1 feet. I didn't bring a tape measure with me too.
Yeah, I would, based on what we saw on the site, the existing setback, I think is more like 3 feet to a piece of curbing that was identified as the probable setback, and given the airflow requirements of the unit, the less than 1 foot setback is the only reasonable setback that could be achieved.
That is my motion, unless there's any other additions or suggestions.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Mr. Holby. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So the motion is passed. Have a good evening. Have a safe trip back on the ferry. Thank you for your time. We will note that Mr. Francis is resuming his seat as an alternate member. And we will now continue. We have finished with old business since we already dealt with the Blount application. We'll move on to new business. So the first matter is application 2227. Rachel Burgess and Thierry, the owner and applicant, 21 Summit Drive, plat 17, lot 73. Request for a dimensional variance under 3277 to construct a 13 by 12 deck with less than the required rear yard setbacks and to exceed the allowable lot coverage for a legal non-conforming lot in the Village Overlay District. Good evening. If you can both identify yourselves, your name and address, so the stenographer can.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I live within 200 feet. I think I have to recuse myself.
okay.
Is that the
So
case?
Mr. Holby will be recusing himself since he lives within 200 feet of the applicants. Therefore, Mr. Francis is now a voting member on this application. So please go ahead and introduce yourselves so the stenographer can get that information. Okay. Okay, so give us a brief description of what it is you'd like to do and why you feel there is justification for a hardship that you need relief from. You can bend that down further if it helps. Or maybe that's not working at all. Seems better.
So we would like to build a 156 square foot deck in our backyard. And so that would be building on 26% instead of 25% of our lot, and it would have that rear setback of 28 feet instead of 30. And the main reason that we want to build it is that our backyard is actually very slanted. And so at the moment, we do not hang out back there at all. We can't set up a table and chairs properly. And so at the moment, it's not the best spot. And so we'd like to build a deck in the back so that we can just use our yard. We feel that the deck size is the size that's most appropriate for the spot without making use of the space without kind of encumbering any of our neighbors. And so we have thought about that as well.
Yeah, there's no direct exit to the backyard right now, so that also allows us to put an exit towards the backyard. We just have to walk around the house to go in the backyard. So that would be a convenient addition to the house.
So I would ask, did you consider any alternative shapes for the deck? Because it looks like you're very close. The rear yard setback is 30 feet. And you're proposing a 2-foot encroachment. Did you look at any other sort of arrangements that maybe made the deck slightly less
Wider
towards the rear
instead of-
yard and longer in the other direction?
Yeah, we have a problem with the basement entrance. We have a small basement. Most of the house is under crawl space. We have a small basement where the furnace, the oil tank, water filtration system is in. And if we would change the shape of the deck, we couldn't go we can't go over the actual basement top. Basically.
So you have a bulkhead that
Yeah.
accesses the
Well,
basement.
Yeah, the bulkhead is about my size, so it's not one of
Well,
those.
that's a substantial
Yeah,
size.
it's a
then.
door.
door.
It's a door.
Yeah, it's just a door.
So the
Yeah.
location of the existing bulkhead precluded you from expanding the deck in that direction and reducing it with regard to the
That's right,
setback.
yeah.
The other question is the square footage of the deck.
Mhm.
So 25% is allowed and you're over by, it looks like 1.08%. Did you evaluate just making the deck a little bit smaller in terms of its square footage? And it looks like part of the deck is the stairs and landing that would be needed to get off of the deck. So maybe you could just speak to how that's informing the size.
Well, I think the size itself would fit probably about a table for 6 to 8 people, and then you have some space for a grill or a little addition umbrella or something like that. And it felt to have the stairs being closer to the overhang of the house for the winter seemed to be a sort of appropriate location for it, because we don't have gutters on that side, and so we sort of probably just sneak our way off snow and things like that from there.
And so it looks like
Yeah.
the deck, there are some doors from within the house that would open onto the deck.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we have a window there right now, so that window would become a two-person door.
And so I would ask, did you consider installing just a like a paved patio with stone or something that's flush with the ground, because that doesn't count towards your setbacks and your lot coverage? And maybe speak to a little bit, because there's that connection to the house, was there a reason why the deck needed to be on the same level as the house?
For the house to be on the same level of the deck? I think it's just handy if you don't have to go down steps with plates from the inside or, you know, like something like that. Even down in the future, say we grow old and happy there, and we're now 70 or something like that, and we just want to go outside.
So
I mean, the floor height
yeah,
from the floor on the inside of the house to where there's the landing of the ground outside is about 3.5, 4 foot.
so the relation to the interior of the house was the most sensible relationship you could come up with of how you could access the deck in a
That's what
reasonable
we
way.
thought, yeah. We thought it,
Did you mention that the space in the backyard also goes
yeah,
down? and
it's
unusable?
it's definitely slanted quite a
So
bit, so you have a
you know, if
drop
you-
over the length of the deck, you probably have a drop of about 2 foot over the length of the deck.
So would you say it's nearly impossible to build that,
Well,
more stone patio
yeah.
level because you, the
Yeah, I
3
mean,
feet.
regardless if you were
Right,
doing
yes.
the stone, if you say you'd have stairs coming out of the house and then an even field of stones or bricks or something like that, you'd still have to box that in at the very end of it, and that would still be, you know, like
nearly
probably
3
about,
feet.
yeah,
You'd need stairs.
yeah,
Stairs.
you'd need to do
Yeah.
some sort of foundation. I don't know. I mean,
So
it's,
So you have existing site conditions that helped inform the design. of the
yeah,
deck.
Yes, absolutely.
Are there any questions or comments from the board regarding this?
No.
Would any member of the public in attendance like to comment on this application? Not seeing any takers on this one. We'll bring it back to the applicant. Is there any further information or reasoning you'd like to explain to the board why this is a hardship for you and you need this relief?
I think we've covered everything.
pretty
Yeah.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions or discussion amongst the board members? Not hearing any. Is there someone prepared to make a motion on this application?
I'll take a stab at it.
Excellent. Mr. Francis, would like to go ahead?
I propose that application 22-27, Rachel Burgess and Ferry, owner and applicant of 21 Summer Drive, plat map 17, lot 73, request for a dimensional variance under sections 32-77 to construct a 13 by 12 deck with the less than required rear yard setback to exceed the allowable lot coverage with the not forming lot in the village overlay district to be accepted. The acceptance is based on a hardship that is created by the land itself. The backyard, there is a unique characteristic within the layout of the backyard, which does not allow them to build a stone patio that would be level. It does not change the surrounding area, and it is not due to any physical or economic disability of the applicant. The hardship is not a result of any prior action, the applicant. It does not result primarily from the desire to realize a greater financial gain. The granting of the variance will not alter the general characteristics of the surrounding area and conforms with the purpose and intent of the Warwick zoning ordinance and comprehensive plan. The relief requested is the least relief necessary due to other building constraints, such as the location of the bulkhead with respect to the back of the house and the rear of the house. And I think that's it.
And is it more than a mere inconvenience if it were not to be granted?
Yes, it would be very much more than a mere or inconvenience to the applicants, as they do not use the current space because of the layout of their backyard. So
Are there any additions or amendments to this application or any conditions?
Did we just memorialize what the figures are going to be?
sure, the dimensional variance will be 13 by 12 deck with less than the required setback.
which will be, what do we have here?
Yep. And exceeds the allowable lot coverage for the legal non-conforming lot in the village overlay.
And so we'll just note that 28 feet where 30 is required is what they're seeking. And that the lot coverage required is 25% and they're seeking 26.08%. So the construction of the deck shall not exceed those limits as specified in the application.
So the existing maximum lot coverage is 24%, the required is 25%. They are proposing a 1.08 increase. We are proposing the allowance of 26.08% for that maximum coverage.
Anything else to add to this motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The application is approved. Good luck with building your deck. Mr. Holby, yes? Oh, I'm sorry. Was there a second?
I'll second.
Chuck had seconded it, and we voted in favor. Mr. Holby is returning to the board as a voting member, and Mr. Francis will resume the position of an alternate member. Next matter under new business is application 2228. Joseph and Caitlin Weisberger, owner, and Joseph Weisberger, applicant. 45 West Street, plat map 13B, lot 37. They're requesting a dimensional variance under 3277 to construct a 628 square foot addition, a 35 square foot bulkhead, and a 100 square foot deck to exceed the allowable lot coverage in the R10 zoning district. Good evening, all. If you could just identify yourselves, so the stenographer can report that.
Good evening, I'm Joseph Weisberger of 45 West Street.
Thank you.
And Caitlin Weisberger.
Also a 45 West Street.
45 West Street.
And
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and honorable members of the board. My name is Robert Weisberger. I am Joe's father. I'm a practicing attorney. I'm here for moral support.
and counsel as necessary.
As necessary. I have no entry of appearance, but
All right, so if you'd like to describe what your proposed project is and why you feel there's a hardship and why you need relief from the requirements under the ordinance.
So we currently live in a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom cape. We have one child and, as you can see, another one on the way. So we are looking to put on an addition so we can maintain in the community and raise our children in the barn. We are proposing an addition that will be 628 square feet addition, a 35 square foot bulkhead, and 100 square foot deck.
And so the addition is within the setbacks, and all you're seeking in this case is the amount of lot coverage that's allowed on the property. So you're looking for a new coverage of 24%, and the ordinance requires a maximum of 20% coverage.
Yes.
Correct.
So let me just ask you, in coming up with your designs here for these two additions, the deck, the bulkhead, what was the process in determining that this amount of square footage was the amount needed to suitably provide enough space to raise your growing family?
So we needed another bedroom and bathroom because we only have one bathroom. So we needed additional space for our child on the way, for 2 children. And we needed another living area where we can gather as a family.
Okay. And it looks like you also had to create a new bulkhead.
Yes.
And is that for a new space that's going to be under the addition?
Yes.
We had to create a new access point, given that the current exit for the basement overlaps with the deck.
So the current exit for the basement would no longer be usable, and you'd have to create a new exit for the basement. And then the size of the deck that you're proposing, What was the thought process behind that, in terms of serving the needs of your family?
It ended up boiling down to a design element, and we needed to have a place to step down from the proposed exit from the structure. So they needed to provide a means to go from that elevation of where the slider would be down to the existing yard.
Okay, so the deck will serve as a way to transition from within the house, and you can step out onto that deck, and then that will lead down to the backyard space.
Correct.
Yeah, I just want to add that the existing deck is 238 square feet. And the new deck will be only 100 square feet, so it's 138 square feet less. In order to create less coverage.
Yeah, so you're proposing basically a trade-off to get more interior space in the house, that you're willing to forego some of the exterior space you have on the current deck.
Yes.
Board members, what questions do you have for the applicants? If any. Garrett, you have something? Chuck, anything? Seem to be none at the present. So at this point, we will go to the public comment. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to offer comments on this application? Still not able to convince anyone to make comment. So we're going to bring that back again. I'm having a hard time selling this public comment this evening. We'll bring it back to the applicants. So is there any further information you'd like to share with the board with regard to the reasons why you were seeking relief and why you feel this is the least amount of relief necessary to satisfy the needs of your growing family?
Just to be able to stay in the community. We really like where we live. Bought our house in 2015. And now we're raising our family here, so we'd like to continue to do that.
Okay, very good. Are there any other discussion points amongst the board or any final questions for the applicants? Hearing none, is someone prepared to make a motion on this application?
Give it a shot.
Mr. Thibodeau, please go ahead.
I will make a motion to approve application 2228 Joseph and Caitlin Berger, 45 West Street, plat map 13B, lot 37. Construct a 628 square foot addition and a 35 square foot bulkhead with a 100 square foot deck, exceeding the allowable lot coverage of an R10 zoning district of 20% up to 24%. Reasons for this is that they only have a 2-bedroom house at the time, and the increased size of their family is requiring them to add the 628 square foot addition for indoor living space, giving up the 238 square foot deck, replacing it with a 100 square foot deck that is serving as a step down from the back door to the ground level. The new bulkhead needs to be constructed due to the fact that they need the access point to the basement that is going to be covered up by the 628 square foot addition.
Are there other reasons pertinent to these standards? Oh. So the answer is yes.
Yes.
And what evidence is given for the fact that it's the least amount of relief necessary? Anyone else can feel free to contribute.
Adding one extra bedroom.
So adding the extra bedroom
And the bathroom.
and the bathroom would be the least amount
The
of
least amount of
to do that.
space they need to be able
Okay.
to satisfy the needs of their family.
And with regard to the character of the area and the town's comprehensive plan, we find that it's in keeping with those documents.
It's keeping it compliant with the neighborhoods, with the neighborhood and the comprehensive plan.
It'll be good to have more children there too.
Yes.
They grow up fast.
And it's appropriate to encourage families to stay in the town of
Stay in the
Warren.
town of Warren.
Right.
And would it be more than a mere inconvenience to this family if it were not to be granted?
It would be more of a mere inconvenience to this family if they only had a 2-bedroom with 2 children.
Because
I produce large houses.
they would have to move elsewhere possibly.
They would have to move elsewhere and leave the community.
Okay.
I didn't know if you wanted to give my reasons why. I have 6 kids. So I don't-
Good thing you're not before us for it.
Yeah.
Are there any other amendments, additions, or conditions to this particular motion? Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Mr. Holby, all in favor of the motion? Aye. Any opposed? So your motion is passed. Good luck getting your project. I don't know if you'll be able to quite get it finished before the next one arrives, but hopefully not too long afterwards.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
We appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, as a former member of the zoning board of review in Smithfield, Rhode Island, I just want to tell you how very impressed I am with your operations. You are. If I had a choice, I'd be on this. board.
Well, feel free to come back anytime.
Thank you.
Have a good evening. The next matter under new business is application 2231, John R. Barker Trust, the owner, and John R. Barker, the applicant, 27 Maple Road, plat map 16, lot 321. Request for a variance under 3290C to store more than the allowable number of boats on a residential property in the R40 zoning district. Is there a representative here that'd like to come forward on this application?
So, Mr. Chairman, I don't see Mr. Barker or his representatives
I do not
here.
see
And
either.
I know there are people here to comment as abutters. I would ask that either continue this or dismiss it because he had ample notice that this was coming. He filed the application.
Yeah, we do not have a representative of the applicant here that we can take testimony from. So I'll ask, what is the board's pleasure? We could either dismiss this without prejudice due to the lack of a representative, or at the board's option, it could be continued so that the applicant may have the opportunity to appear. What is everyone's
My
feeling?
vote is to dismiss it.
Without
prejudice.
My vote is to dismiss it without prejudice either. He doesn't even have any map in here showing where the lot is. It's not connected to his own property. There's not enough information in this packet without question.
Yeah, there's no site plan.
All right. So is there a motion with regard to this application?
I'll make a motion to dismiss application 2231 without prejudice.
Okay. Is there a second on that motion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? So this application is dismissed. So anyone who's here wanting to comment, your time is no longer required. You may go about your business. Yes?
I suggest taking the last application next, 26, I believe, selected by Bruce Cox.
Oh, Mr. Cox is sailing this evening. Okay, we can certainly reorder that in favor of Mr. Cox, who is a frequent member here at the board. So we can go on to number 2232. Albert and Kate Federico, the owners and applicants, 14 Fern Drive, flat map 19, lot 196. There's a request for a variance under 3277 to construct a new 2-car garage with the less than required side yard setbacks within the R10 zoning district. Good evening, all. If you could each just identify yourselves, name and address, so we can record that.
Hi, good evening. Thank you so much for hearing us tonight. My name is Catherine Federico. I'm a resident at 14 Fern Drive in Warren, Rhode Island.
And I'm Albert Federico, 14 Fern Drive.
And Madam, you are
I'm Kara Pomerantz, architect from Barrington, and as a member of the Barrington Zoning Board, I just want to say thank you for your service and your time.
okay. Thank you very much. So if you could just give us a brief overview of what your intent is here with regard to this garage and why you feel there's a hardship due to the side yard setback and why the amount of relief you're seeking is the least amount needed to construct this garage.
Sure. Well, we moved to Warren in 2021. And we had one child on the way. Now we are, deciding to grow our family, and we feel as we've seen our neighbors with kids, we live in a very kid-friendly neighborhood. We've seen that kids tend to accumulate things, and we feel that a 2-car garage would allow us a place to park our cars as well as store some of the stuff that children tend to accumulate. Like, we also only have one full bathroom, and the addition space above the garage would allow us to build a second full bathroom. So that way the kids would have their own bathroom and we would be able to have our own bathroom. And our current existing full bathroom is square footage wise very small.
And so what is the setback that you're seeking on the side yard? I think,
If that's okay, it's 6.5 feet,
where, how much is required?
15 feet.
Where 15 is required.
I might also add that we currently do not have a garage. Everyone else in the neighborhood does have a garage. We're both nurses who take call frequently. So waking up at 2 o'clock in the morning and only having a 20-minute window to get to Providence for a stroke or for another anesthetic case, which Albert is doing, to have to clean your ice off your car and snow off your car is very inconvenient. So to have the convenience of just being able to have a clean vehicle and be able to back it up appropriately and just get on your way to the emergency and to help other people is very
And
advantageous.
Okay. And so is the new garage aligned with where the present driveway is located?
Sure.
Essentially.
Essentially, yes, sorry. Essentially, yes. If you look at the site plan, we were able to fit 24 feet wide, a 24-foot wide garage, which would allow for 2 cars to park next to each other. And then we chose not to ask for more relief on the side. And instead, we're going to be storing strollers and bikes and things in front of the cars. So that allowed us to leave that 6.5 feet minimum with a 2-car garage.
And I noticed there's also some stairs due to a change in elevation between the mudroom where the garage accesses the house and the floor of the garage. So was that also one of the factors in meeting the width of 24 feet to be able to fit that stair?
Correct. Yes, there's a 3.5-foot elevation change from the front of the house to the back of the house. And there's a 3-foot elevation change from the garage to the first floor. So not only will the stairs allow them to enter into the house from the garage, but it'll also allow them to navigate into the backyard within the footprint of the garage.
Okay.
I should also mention that currently their bikes and lawnmowers and yard equipment is stored in the existing shed towards the rear of the property, and navigating the existing shed and all the way to the front of the house is cumbersome. So this will allow them an easier means to do so.
Okay.
So can I ask you a question about the side entrance that you have in your current driveway space? That looks like it's a setback entrance towards the rear of the house. And in the pictures, it looks like you're going to keep that entrance, but bring it forward. Is that true?
Correct. Yes, there'll be a mudroom that allows them to enter. So right now they enter directly into the kitchen. And so we will be pulling that front wall forward so that they can have a mudroom before they enter into the kitchen.
Are there specific questions on the application? Okay. Pause for a moment while I ask if If anyone
You have a question?
in the public would like to offer any comment, I do not see anyone indicating that they would. Is there any further information you'd like to convey to the board of the reasons why you need this relief for the garage addition?
I would just like to say that like we've moved to Warren, we've been here for a while and we love living here, and this variance would allow us to stay in Warren and allow us to raise our family in Warren. And that's something that we both feel really strongly that we would really love to do.
Very good.
I should also add too that in the design, in considering the design, we were very modest in terms of what we are proposing so that we wouldn't alter the character of the surrounding area. And so we did provide some photographs of many of the neighbors on the street, which this is very, there's a precedent for a Cape style home with a 2-car garage or a Gambrel style home with a 2-car garage. So this will, you know, this addition will very much fit within the characteristic of the surrounding area.
And I can say from my own personal knowledge of the area that it is not at all inconsistent that homes in this area do have either attached or freestanding garages to the house. And there are a number that have attached 1 or 2-car garages consistent with the area. Other comments or questions for the applicant? Not hearing any. Someone prepared with a motion on this application? Anyone for a motion? Anyone at all?
I can do it, Mr. Sorry. I had to-
Okay, Mr. Nice.
I was digging up some paperwork.
Very good. So
All
we'd
right.
like to proceed with the motion.
This is Mr. Nystrom. I move approval of application number 22-33, Albert and Kate Federico, owners and applicants, 14 Fern Drive, plat map 19, lot 196. Request for a variance under sections 32-77 to construct a new 2-car garage with the less than required side yard setback in the R10 zoning district. In granting this variance, we find that the hardship is to the unique characteristics of the subject land or structure and not to the general characteristics of the surrounding area and not due to the physical or economic disability of the applicant. We've heard some testimony that there are some land grading issues, and that in order to adequately store vehicles, bicycles, and other children's paraphernalia, construction of a garage at this point is pretty much necessary. Construction will also allow for an additional bathroom space, which will make living in this home with multiple children much easier. We find that the hardship is not the result of any prior action of the applicant. It does not result primarily from the desire to yield greater financial gain. We've heard testimony from the applicants that they moved in about a year ago-ish, in 2021.
January. It doesn't have to be that.
Yeah, it does. I'm getting, so you guys are new, you didn't, yeah, so it's, so again, they purchased the property as is, currently got a driving pad, and now they just want to make some improvements. And again, we've heard testimony that this is not to realize greater financial gain, is to improve their ability and, happiness living in this home with the growing family. Granting of this variance will not alter the general character of the surrounding area, and the request conforms to the purpose and intent of the Warren zoning ordinance and comprehensive plan. Again, certainly the Warren comprehensive plan encourages the retention of families and growing of families in the town of Warren. And certainly, as indicated from the pictures provided in the exhibits, as well as from my own personal experience investigating the area, certainly many homes in that area have attached garages. So this is certainly something that fits with the locale. And we find that the relief requested is the least relief necessary. We've heard testimony from the architect indicating that they were attempting to be as modest as possible, in designing and constructing this garage, trying to figure out the most economical way to do this addition so that they can incorporate this additional bathroom space. And certainly, when you're looking at photographic evidence of what's been presented in the site plans, as well as homes in the area, this garage is certainly in line with everything else and does not seem to be excessive. With this variance not to be granted, we find the hardship would be more than a mere inconvenience. We've heard testimony today that as the family grows, they need more space. And if we were to deny the construction of this garage, they would not only be down a bathroom space, they would also be down plenty of storage space as well as vehicular storage. And that both the applicants are nurses, often on call, and need to very quickly scoot up to Providence, being able to throw open the garage door and peel out onto a Child Street as safely as possible is something that is going to be necessary. And this isn't really further findings, but I will just memorialize what they are seeking. The current side yard setbacks required are 15 feet, and what is being sought is 6.5 feet.
Have any other conditions or amendments to this motion? Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Mr. Thibodeau, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Nope. So congratulations. You can proceed with your garage. Again, I'm not sure the garage will be ready before the little one arrives, but hopefully as soon thereafter as humanly possible.
We don't
Yeah, we don't
Sorry,
ban
we
that.
are forever.
We're doing
Yeah.
this, like, everybody that says that. You
We gotta sign a contract. And show me the dotted line. So have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you so very much.
You're
We
welcome.
appreciate it.
Okay. So we're going to take a 5-minute recess at this point in case Mr. Cox shows up, but if not, we will reconvene at 8 o'clock. And I see that, yeah, I'm going to continue with the engineer. And then should we get to a point where we need Mr. Cox's testimony, we can address that, but I think we can proceed. All right, so we'll stand in recess until 8 o'clock.
That was,
This is going to be way past.
before 8 o'clock.
I thought it would be 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
My son's an electrician.
No,
it's like-
much better job than I was.
They were redoing.
One was like, I misplaced this. So I was scrambling.
So was what else?
It looks like the other fruit that they hold.
Yeah, where did
Yeah. Well, it was now-
6:15.
What it was it the wall?
Yeah, Gray Meadows, so we need to see the north of CBS. I didn't see it. Is that what was over there? They're saying. Parties.
It advances, like, I don't think, I think they do more.
There were more deliveries.
Yeah.
But
You know, this does all sorts of things. You go in there, buy oil, batteries, and stuff like that.
Yeah, I go in there too.
I went to Argus to buy oil. Twice the price of it.
Yeah.
Artie's is good if I feel like.
Yeah.
Looking smart. Yeah, yeah, like I went to go buy fuel stabilizer and I'm just like, because they were open, and I'm like, okay, how much for this? But if I want to buy all kinds of belts and gears, it would have been. Yeah.
Argus is pretty good that way, but. I don't have.
Yeah.
I was Argus.
Yeah, I do all.
Yeah, it's advances.
I used to buy batteries. 40 or 50 batteries, sometimes 60 batteries a year, so I had a huge discount. Now I walk in there. Stand by, it's like that. You know, it used to be $40 for them. Now it's $100. No, there's been no time.
And the storage place is part of that lot, or they just pay to have that bottom sign? Because the storage space is, well, it's behind CVS.
Yeah.
So does that lot go in an L shape?
I don't.
The storage site is set up funky.
It must be in an L shape.
Yeah, I'm trying to. Let me see if I can pull it out.
I'm already poking myself in the eye.
So I'll give it 3.
Three, yeah.
down there.
Yep. There's one south on Avacon.
It's like Dunkin' Donuts. Yeah, they can be across the street from each other, but they service. They're doing
So
south
you
or north.
go into the Quincy and
Full business.
you've got,
Oh, yeah.
you've got Advance, you've got, what's the other one that's popping up all over the place, the Irish one?
The Irish.
O'Reilly.
O'Reilly.
Yeah, O'Reilly's, they're popping up everywhere. you know? And it's funny, these guys are smart, they're putting like O'Reilly's, and you'll see them all over the place. And
Glad people have such a need for
they
auto.
put 3 stores in a thing, O'Reilly's on one side, Dunkin' on the other. In the middle, we have someone else.
I only get leased cars, so if there's anything wrong with it.
What's the 30,000?
Your problem, Reggie. It's your problem, not mine. You figure it out.
Yeah, I can't do it, least I put way too many miles. on it. I'll put 2025 on that. Yeah,
So I'm on the 15,000 lease.
okay.
Financial people reached out to me, yes, I want the hassle. This is
Well, it's like they
Someone wants this car?
all the advertised prices are
You
like
take
the
it
low
back.
mileage base, and you go, what do you actually drive? Well, it's good.
Next thing you're gonna do is say, you know, 50%.
Yeah, a buddy of mine, he leased cars for a long time, and he ended up getting a job lives in town, and getting a job at Electric Boat. Didn't really cross his mind, you know, he was just like, just had the car in like 3 months ago. You know, it's big to do, you go over.
Oh, it is.
He was nowhere near close to like.
It was like 25 cents a mile for every mile.
Well,
That's big,
I
it's
felt
big
bad,
money,
he's
yeah.
just.
Yeah, for every mile, it's another 25 cents. And it's okay if you go over 100. You're over like 5,000-10,000.
Yeah, so it's like, why wasn't it turned in early? And they're like, you've had it for 4 months.
You can. If your vehicle is in demand and they really want it, sell it as a used car, you can go and be like, yeah, I'm over the mileage, but you guys really want this car? Because that means I'm so, well, I can write you a check now, just buy out the car and go sell it on, Carvana.
I'm gonna make money.
Fine. I mean, you want it back or
Yeah.
not? So you take it.
I can pull from the Scout VW, so I've got a VW wagon. I bought it like 5 years ago. It's like 24,000. I got a letter in the mail. They want to pay me 21 to buy that. And I'm like,
Yeah.
so I basically had a car and just, if I wanted to turn in, just pay 4,000, for the fun of having it. It's insane. There's like no parts on it.
They make no money on new cars. It's the used cars.
I had 4 units here.
So if they can make such a car to someone else, that's what they're not affordable. They're selling a new car.
I'm not in the wrong.
I used to have a coupon, because I used to work for Geico. Ford, GM, and a VW. Was that?
Not with Geico anymore.
Oh, yeah, big to do. They're streamlining, and I think they're in a lot of financial trouble. I got laid off in June.
Oh, in June?
Yeah.
So what are you doing now?
So I'm working for Jack Helvino, so he's in the Billboard Fight Back.
Oh, one of the billboard.
Yeah, well, I used to work for Rob.
Oh, you know,
Yeah, no, it's a good group.
How was
Whenever
that?
I ever get rear-ended,
Call me.
I'm calling you. Which billboard lawyer should I go? Like, oh, here's my situation.
How was it to work for him?
Back injury, neck
Oh,
problem.
we'll take care of it.
I mean, I know he takes care of his underling employees.
Was that?
I mean, he packs his employees.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he-
it's a good deal.
Yeah.
But, yes, it was awesome. I had a coupon. I bring it based on.
But he asked me to find the spot. And this was like 4 years ago. And he said, figure out what I'm gonna need.
Yeah.
And I said, bro, building wise, you're probably gonna need, all right, you're probably gonna need 15 to 20. You'll probably need 25. 25. You want like place for daycare. You want He goes, no way. I said, and the architect with 3,000 words. 15 years. I said, I was pedestrian because what you do, you do 10 by 10 room. So 6.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we're ready to reconvene. Oh, okay.
Yes, thank you.
All right, so the board is resuming at 8:04 and 30 seconds. So we'll now move ahead with application 2226, GCM Warren LLC, the owner, and AutoZone Parts, Inc., applicant, 611 to 615 Medicom, Plat 15B, Lot 338A, there's a request for a parking variance under 32105G to have less than the required parking spaces and a sign variance under 32112A4, 32112D 1 and 2, 32112E3, 32115A and B to exceed the allowable signage square footage in the business zoning district. Good evening. If you want to identify yourself for the record, please.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Neil Hingrani, PLS for the applicant.
Okay. And so give us a brief, if you will, description of what is being proposed on this site and why there is a hardship that you feel you need relief from. I will note that I believe, Rhonda, you circulated the site plan to the board via email. That wasn't included in the original packet. So we could see the parking, which I'm assuming is also illustrated on the board.
It is, thank you. And I think just as I get started here, I am not Attorney Bruce Cox, if that wasn't clear.
We're well aware you're not Bruce Cox.
So I appreciate you bearing with me on this. Yes, well, you're on lucky day. You're gonna have to bear with me. But if you don't mind, I'm gonna give you a brief description of the proposed site. And I'll start with the parking variance on the chance that Bruce didn't fall off a boat and shows up here. Oh, he is, great.
Oh, Mr. Cox, in the nick of time. Well, several could not be heard due to problems. No, we're,
Good evening. Yes.
we're more than happy to have you with us this evening. I hope was sailing successful this evening.
It was spectacular.
Spectacular.
Well, we'll explain what happens when post the sheets again.
Oh, that will actually be a
We
problem.
have to chase this movie down. Okay.
All right.
Good evening.
Good evening,
We're
Mr.
here on
Cox.
behalf of AutoZone. And we have two essential zoning reliefs requested. Number one is with the parking numbers that we have, and secondly is with the signage. As been explained in the application, the signage that we're asking for is comparable to that which is at CVS, actually a little less. When you analyze the CVS signage, you will see that the smaller letters that you see in their explanatory area are actually, if you use the ordinance correctly, 4 feet tall. They're not the 2 feet tall that their application looks like. So we are decreasing our sign as much as possible. We have no branding on this building other than the sign that's on the front and the sign that's on the street. The street sign is a pre-existing non-conforming situation. We cannot alter that. That's a box sign that sits there. There's another sign that's assimilated with it, so that cannot be altered. The sign that is on the building is just about as de minimis, as small as it can possibly be made. The building itself is a non-branded building, which means by that, it's not like our competitor across the street. It is a standard signed store for them. It looks like their stores. This looks like a colonial building. It's all gray and white trim. It's a beautiful little building. So that was a request to the planning board. We wanted to accommodate the request of the planning board in that regard. And I think it's going to be a very nice structure. The second element is on the parking. We tried to accommodate the request for green space. And if we didn't have the green space that's out by Metacom Avenue, then that would have been parking spaces and we would have been able to meet your zoning regulation. But we all know what the parking lot at Job Lot looks like. It's a asphalt jungle. So we realize that the ordinances are based upon old standards. An analysis was done by AutoZone and the engineer as to what is actually needed. And that was submitted very thoroughly by the engineer and their reports in terms of the layout and the sequence. As you can also see from a standpoint, while there's no legal connection between the two, CVS and the AutoZone parking zones, they're owned by the same building, own company. It's not hard to imagine that CVS people might be popping over to AutoZone during a particular busy time, and AutoZone people might, when CVS has got an open spot, be there. Can't say it's going to happen, but it's not the legality, it's the reality. And that's oftentimes what the zoning board works with, is not what the legality is, but what the reality is on the ground. This is why you have the authority to grant relief. So the gist of the situation is we have complied with all the requirements
of the planning board. We have preliminary approval. We now have to go back to Monday night final, pending your approval of our two elements of relief that we need from you. We have full approval from DEM and everybody else. The planning board did ask us about considering moving the building forward. The answer is we can't. AutoZone will not, and because that might trigger a new review by DEM. And I did not intend to be before you on a Wednesday summer night. This should have been before you in March and April, but DEM took months and months to do what was a fairly minor review. So the idea of delaying this another year would have been blown up, period. So those are the releases we're requesting. I think they're pretty straightforward. I do appreciate the interesting balance between the planning board and the universal application and the zoning board. I think it's a good balance. And those are the two elements of relief that have been requested.
And could you just briefly mention there's an easement on the north side
There is
that
an easement.
precludes you from putting parking over there?
That is a
correct?
hardship that we do suffer. There's an easement that actually services the storage unit back here. We cannot eliminate that. So that precludes that. Furthermore,
How do they get to the storage by that easement on the north side?
Good question. It exists there. It's on my bearings here, but that's the southwest side. Oh, it's over here. This is the storage, and the easement comes through. Here. It's a legal impediment on the
They
site.
have an easement down the side of the building into the rear of the building.
Yeah, right here.
So north and
The west side and north side, that's correct.
But by all practical standards, there's greenery at the back of the building that.
That is correct.
They don't really physically at the moment have the ability to go through there.
That is true, but we can't.
We have to
impede their
respect
legal- We
these-
have to respect the legal rights, exactly right.
So you're
that is a
precluded,
hardship.
so you're
That is
precluded from developing anything on that.
Correct. You cannot put any part. 650.
Right, and we've heard that you testified that the existing pylon sign is there. You're refacing within the frame of the existing sign for a new tenant.
Exactly.
And so the only real new signage you're introducing is what you described as the minimal signage on the building itself.
Originally, it was requested when we had conceptual review of planning to be at 48 inches to match CVS. They asked if we could decrease it at all. So it's sort of a compromise between, but when you look at the CVS signage, it's actually quite a bit larger if you follow the technical details of the zoning regulations.
Okay. Questions for Mr. Cox?
This is Mr. Nysom. Have you put I may have missed this, but is there a hard number of the amount of spaces that are required versus what you're able to actually put in?
That is in my write-up.
I think it's 26.
Yeah, I just want to make sure. So
There's
26
9.
is what the ordinance requires, and what you're able to put in is 15.
Is it 35 versus 26?
Hold on.
One at a time.
I'm not a math guy. That's why I wanted to ask.
35 is required, proposing 26. So they're looking for-
Okay.
Relief.
I mean,
So that is correct. That is just for the AutoZone parcel. These two parcels are joined. There's no separation between the two. And I think the total variance request is 25 spaces. So the total space required for both buildings. So the variance request itself is.
So does the CVS have an existing variance so there's already a variance in place?
Sorry, I can't say variance specifically, but they do have a deficiency.
But we don't know if there's anything on file officially. So it's an existing condition, and we're going to memorialize that for these two properties that are united under the same ownership, that you're requesting a parking variance in total for the two lots.
you're not eliminating any.
It's correct, right? CVS is CVS, we're not adding, we're not removing. We're basically just acknowledging.
So what was it, 25 were short in total?
25 in total, that's
from what
If we
the,
treat this.
yeah, because it's treated as one parcel. And the landscaping you've provided, is that in excess of what the basic ordinance requires in terms of trees and landscaping that you've attempted to introduce more green space?
So that's a little bit of a tricky question. I think the short, well, there's no short answer. So the real answer is that we are increasing the amount of landscaping on the site. The site was previously deficient with respect to impervious coverage calculation. We didn't get relief from that from the board, but I think the short answer is that even though we need that relief because we don't meet the standard, we're still increasing the amount of green space on the site.
Other,
And are you utilizing the existing building or you just tearing it down and putting a new building?
If the existing building. Yes.
The existing buildings. That's the medical building.
That's the medical, they're gonna take it.
That's
I'm
going to
sorry.
be taken down.
They'll do this. They'll do
This is what the existing site looks like.
They have to.
in the site.
So that's the, okay. But that's going to have wood clapboard on the outside,
It'll have a
plastic clapboard or whatever.
it'll have a clapboard or-
Yeah, this is clapboard and shingle synthetics, but it will be gray with white trim and such, so make it more aesthetic pleasing.
Not really in our purview.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it could look like anything from our point of view.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's what we've done to make it, and that's part of why our signage, that's one of our hardships with signage, is the fact we are not making it look like a quote unquote AutoZone building. We're making it look like a colonial type building.
Other questions for the applicants? Okay, I'll just check if there's anyone in the public who wishes to comment. It's not looking promising. It's been a very poor night for public comment. Couldn't sell it to anyone. We'll close the public comment and bring it back to the board. Are there other questions from the board or discussion amongst the board members regarding the two variances, one for the amount of parking on site and one for the square footage of the signage? I'm not hearing anything else.
Yeah, it's,
Just with the signs, I know he's always ask, I get, hold on, I gotta. pull
Yeah,
that
I
up.
want to ask about the sign.
Yeah, it seems like a lot. So, request is 70 square feet, where 20 is allowed.
Well, I think we have to recognize that the pylon sign is there and they are by right allowed to reface that pylon sign within its existing framework.
And so what's the square footage for the pylon side?
the freestanding sign is 90 square feet. There are, our 12 is allowed, so we were asking for the 78 feet of difference. We have no option.
That's not on the pylon sign. Pylon sign is.
Oh, the pylon sign.
The freestanding sign.
The street, that's the street sign, the freestanding one on the street. That's pre-existing.
That's 90 square feet?
That is 90.
You're requesting 90 square.
No, we're requesting is 78 square feet.
I'm sorry.
The new sign is 78, correct, on the building?
The new, on the facade is also 90.
The facade sign is 90.
That's correct. Where
And the
20 is
existing-
allowed, 20 is allowed, we're asking for 70 square feet.
And the existing freestanding sign
Is 90, where 12 is allowed, so we're asking 78.
which the freestanding sign really doesn't even come into it because they are allowed to reface that existing
So
sign.
that's moved. So it's
Yeah,
not
really,
even-
the existing sign is
Okay.
not even relevant. I mean, we can memorialize what the total signage will be on the property, including that sign. But really, we have no jurisdiction over preventing them from refacing the existing sign.
Okay, so what you're asking for is the one, is the sign facade?
That's correct. The one that's actually on the building. Which is less, that's less than CVS.
That's the 70.
That's correct.
square feet. We look at each.
It's also
property
less than
uniquely.
Burger King signs are 5 feet tall. Burgers.
We look at each property uniquely because
I understand
the
that.
place and time when they were there, they were under that auspice of code. and whatnot. So.
And relief was given to them. And so there should
again,
be a
we're
certain.
looking at each property independently. Thank
Is there lighting on the sign of the building?
It will be in essence dark sky lighting for the parking lot and it's internally illuminated. The ordinance actually allows us to use neon type tubing. We would obviously be using LED, so the softer lighting.
So the building sign is internal, it's like a plastic sign that is internally illuminated, which is allowed within this district.
Exactly.
The only district in town in which it is allowed.
I understand.
And the existing pylon sign is already internally illuminated. And you're not proposing to alter that in any way.
No, we
just
are
with
not.
basic sign.
As far as the signs go, are they going to be on 24 hours a day? Are they going to be timed?
At this point in time, as far as I understand, it's 24 hours a day. If we wish to put a condition on that, I don't think that AutoZone would be thrilled with it, but I think they would understand it.
That would impact whether CVS sign.
Mhm. Right.
Well, I mean,
Well, no,
the CVS sign
CVS
is not on.
actually-
It's
This is
storage.
storage.
This is with storage and.
What are the operation hours?
The operating hours of the store, typical 8 to. operational hours.
Yeah, I mean, it's not unreasonable or uncommon for this board to apply the illumination only to hours of business operation for the advertising signage. And then safety lighting, like, lighting the parking lot or what is safe for egress from the building could be continued beyond that, but it has been the practice to limit advertising signage illumination to the hours of the business actually operating.
So would that be the LED AutoZone sign on the side of the building? We could say up to 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock and then turn it off,
Operation.
or just hours of operation?
Yeah, I think we would take the opportunity.
Well, I think we could have the
pedestals-
opportunity, because they're asking for more signage than what is required, that we may want to make a condition that stipulates the overall lighting program for the site as a whole. Since this is a new business coming to the site, I think we would have the purview to stipulate lighting requirements.
Could we ask that they be comparable to CVS? And if CVS, I don't know if CVS is on 24 hours or not, they're not open 24 hours. I don't know if they stay on 24 hours, but if we could have it, so it doesn't look like a dark store, you don't want a dark space on a thoroughfare anyways. Be comparable to CVS and terminus at say 10 or 11 o'clock at night.
I mean, we
If
can
CVS is,
we can either give you specific hours of operation for the business, or we can set a specific limit that the sign must turn off at 9 or 10, or give you some specific thing. I think with regard to whatever CVS is doing, that is a separate property. And whenever their sign was permitted, they were granted whatever relief they requested or predated the ordinance. But in this case, this is a new business. And so it's within our purview to condition it on what is appropriate for the customers that your business is serving.
all right, from the perspective of CVS, I can tell you that their signage was all subject to zoning relief being given. And there's no indication about illumination there. I can tell you that the AutoZone opens about 7:30 and runs until 9 o'clock most evenings. So I think in fairness to AutoZone, to allow them to, they're gonna have staff, obviously, store closes, clean up, shut down, close the building. I think 10 o'clock shut off is probably the earliest that's in fairness to the client. You're gonna have employees closing up and.
But you're not having people come to the store. You know that planning board is hesitant because we have anticipated zoning regulations coming through that would even allow this to happen. So I'm suggesting to you that if the zoning board is suggesting 9 o'clock is appropriate, you should.
Well, we can discuss what we
That's what
think
I was
is an
discussing.
we can discuss what we think is an appropriate hour of termination. We can certainly make a distinction between, if there's going to be lighting on the building for safety in terms of the staff needs to leave the building and go to their cars, not in a dark environment, that sort of lighting versus advertising lighting, which is clearly the sign lighting. We can also condition that in a way that we feel is compatible with the way the board treats new business applications and what the parameters we put on from when we think that advertising signage lighting is appropriate versus
Safety and
lighting.
security.
And certainly, we can also go the direction which we have gone in the past, since you are asking for more signage than what is allowed. We could explore the option of, in recognition of potentially more signage, would you be willing to go to non-internally illuminated signage for that consideration and have the signage only externally illuminated? Because that is certainly a trade-off that we have entertained from other businesses on Metacom Avenue, that since they are asking for more, we've asked them to cut back on the internal illumination in respect of that.
If
We
I
went
may-
to external illumination. We went to
Correct.
External illumination on, like the one on the building with the Bajas that just
Mhm.
opened. The lights, the light faces, it comes out and faces into the sun
Mhm.
versus it glowing.
You know, my opinion on that, if this were Starbucks store, for example, you know, maybe solution, but considering a corporation and corporate standard, certainly more important than ours.
So you're from your business model, the internal illumination is more important than what the specific hours are that the sign is illuminated.
It's my understanding based on what I understand from AutoZone is kind of ethos to be, they don't have sort of franchise operations, they own everything. Stores are fairly standardized, that sign can be designed. So I don't think they would want to deviate. That's something that needs to be adjusted for the hours of lighting.
So if AutoZone was proposing to move in a location where that lighting was not available, they would not choose based on their business model to have lights versus the traffic and the frequency of use of their service.
I might ask you to restate that question.
So you're saying that their need to have internal illuminated lights over ways, their need to have it at a specific location?
Oh, no, not at all. I'm saying that.
Because there's plenty of communities that have these ordinances in place because of the pollution that it creates.
Sure.
And so, we're looking to create a corridor with less light pollution. So, just trying to help you understand where the town is coming from with that respect.
Well aware, all for it on a personal level. I guess all I'm trying to say is that going to an externally illuminated sign would probably not be something that would make the light. However, if you would allow an internally illuminated sign, it would restrict the hours of operation of that sign.
Shut it down at 9 o'clock. Sure.
Yeah, and the internally illuminated sign is allowed. But we're saying in recognition of the fact that you're also asking for the size of the sign, are you willing to give back anything? And what we're hearing, I believe, is that you're more willing to accept a curtailment of the hours that the sign shall be illuminated versus eliminating the internal illumination.
That is correct.
So does the board have a feeling, if they've stated that the hours of operation, that the business would close to customers at 9 PM and then staff would need to clean up and close down after that? Do we have a preference on when we feel that the advertising signage should cease? to be
There's another alternative. They could propose a smaller sign.
Correct. I mean, they could-
So those are three options.
Yeah, they could have a smaller
Because
sign.
what they're looking for is a larger sign, which would create more light.
I'm just, is there,
I would propose sign that they want, a half hour, stays on half hour after closing. And that's it.
Just as a point of reference, I know this just.
I didn't see
I
any
would
Snapchat.
Pick up a multiple football game. Plus, there's every Friday night. McDonald's, because that's where I have to go get food. McDonald's would shut off their advertising lights when they close the restaurant.
And which
But
is-
would keep on their parking
Correct.
light internal, but I'm
Yeah.
saying they were shutting off their street and their building lights.
And so McDonald's has just been here within the last year, Burger King has been here within the last year, and the Dunkin' Donuts has just been here last month with regard to their signage. And it is generally consistent with what was stated, that they would be shutting off the illumination of the advertising signage at some short interval after the business.
The interior
closes.
of the place was still, as they were cleaning
Yeah.
up, the parking lot was still lit, all of that. They just would, actually, it's a courtesy, so you know they're not open.
I think you make it just a closing then, but you're right. I mean, somebody drives in with a sign lit and they're been closed for 20 minutes. Perhaps it's best just to have it. Business is over for the day. I don't think it's a big thing because I think they're going to be closing probably more like 6 o'clock than 9. Really think, are they going to be open at 9?
Well, that's the current business model, but I,
Yeah,
obviously,
yeah.
obviously if Warren shuts down at 6:30, 7 o'clock, they're not gonna have people.
I mean, I
till
think,
dinner comes.
if we say a half an hour after their posted closing time,
That's fine.
that the
if they want
signage
that.
must be extinguished. That's certainly reasonable. And that the safety, site safety lighting can be maintained after that point in
The
time.
interior and safety lighting is
Yeah.
not part of this.
Yeah. We can certainly ask that, I'm assuming you're having some sort of lighting for the parking lot.
It's dark sky program.
It's dark
so
sky
all
program.
Focused down, all LED.
Yeah.
All very.
And is that lighting on some sort of a timer, or what is the operating schedule for that parking lot?
That
lighting?
is not currently on a timer that I'm aware of, but obviously you need to have not only safety lighting for the staff, but you'd want security lighting around the building, at least low grade. So you can, don't have a dark space for bad things to happen.
Would the parking lot lighting, so when the building is in use and customers are there and staff is there, the parking lot lighting provides a certain level of illumination. Once the building is closed, could that lighting be reduced to a level that still provides security, but not necessarily at
Certainly.
the
Yeah,
occupancy
that would be no problem.
level?
Obviously, it's not a question I can answer from a standpoint of, gee, I have the person here, but if I think that's a perfectly reasonable condition.
That
to-
your
to
parking would be
decrease.
serviced by adjustable level lighting?
Correct. They are very cognitive of the concept of dark sky lighting and whatnot. Our main contact there has made it very clear that they are very much in control of illumination and can frankly control.
Are there other specific questions for the applicant?
Yes, and I'm only asking because I didn't see it in the materials. Do you have in your materials up there, do you have anything with the image, what the building will look like with the facade sign?
Yeah, we didn't have.
Oh, the actual sign.
Yeah, like when you look at the building, what's the whole package gonna look like? Do you know what I'm saying?
That's a good question, Jason. The package we have doesn't have.
Yeah. Yeah, we said one of the considerations we usually contemplate is, would the signage proposed on the building be appropriate and proportionate to the scale of the building for the purposes of informing the public about this operation? So I think it's correct, very relevant to see the sign in the context of the facade of the building.
So far, we've gotten the parking sort of resolved.
Seem to be in a good place on the parking.
We have the pole sign. That
Pylon is
Pylon,
there.
excuse me.
And we're considering limiting the hours that both the pylon and the building signage are illuminated to half an hour after the posted closing time of the business.
So we're considering the size of the sign in comparison to the building. size.
Yes, and we're gonna look at, we look at the size compared to, is it appropriate? Not only for the size of the building, but also for the distance the building is set back from the street, that it provides reasonable safety in vehicular traffic being able to identify the business before having to slam on their brakes at the last minute because they didn't know that business was there.
So they're
What do you
asking,
got here?
Yeah, what do you got?
Forgive me as I do my best.
Okay, so we're looking at a rendering showing the proposed signage as it would be installed in relation to the facade of the building that faces Metacom Avenue.
roughly about 2/3 of the building.
the front of the building?
Yep, that is the front of the building.
You have 10 inches high.
So there seem to be two levels to the front of, like, there seems to be one part of the building that's slightly elevated, that's on the left, that's roughly 2/3 of the length of the facade, and then there's another piece to the right that doesn't have any signage on it.
Correct. This is the main. Here, so you can see it from the side of it.
Yeah.
That has a green roof line.
And we should note that the building signage is only present on the east side of that main entrance. It's not also present on the south side of that main entrance piece.
Correct. And all other AutoZone stuff has been taken off the building, so that's the only side.
That's correct. The normal AutoZone would have a full racing stripe all the way around it. So it's only on the west face, east facing sign.
Yeah, I'm just looking at that. Yeah, thank you for pulling that up because that helps. That, you know, just from driving Metacom every day, every other day, that seems to be relatively in line with some of the other businesses. Looking at Advanced Auto Parts, you know, some of the other ones, seems to be scaled similarly.
Are there other concerns or clarifications we'd like from the applicant?
This is more just kind of a food for thought. I just thought of this about the pylon. I'm hoping I'm not derailing anything. The pylon's a joint sign, storage place.
Yep.
If we make a ruling about the pylon sign with a timer, the AutoZone, is that going to throw things off for the storage place?
Well, I mean, we're ruling on the AutoZone piece of it.
Yeah.
The storage place, if they want to have their lights on a different timer, subject to whatever the conditions of the approval of that sign were, that's something that the landlord can work out, but our approval would be for the AutoZone. If there's only one lighting system within that sign, well, then that's a condition the landlord would have to deal with if there's a concern there, but the lighting that affects the AutoZone portion would be in our purview.
I don't think that was illuminated. right?
One light, I mean, several,
It's
it's one lighting
illuminated
system
now,
for that
right?
side.
Not like I said, strong, but yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, just wanted to put it out there.
I mean, we're gonna condition it that the AutoZone sign, the illumination shuts off. How they internally manage that, if there's two different timers or whatever they come to agreement on, that's entirely their matter to consider how to do it. We're just telling them what they need to do. Any other closing remarks, Mr. Cox?
No, thank you very much.
So is there a motion on this application?
Mr. Chair, this is going to be additional approval as an application for.
Plan.
And it's only some additional approval with,
Yeah. I guess it's Mr. Nystrom again.
Oh, geez, hold on, give me a sec. Wow, okay,
We can add findings of fact as needed from other members.
sounds good. All right, let's give this a crack. This is Mr. Nystrom. I move approval of application number 22-26 GCM Warren LLC owner. AutoZone Parts Incorporated applicant 611-615 Metacom Avenue. Plat map 15B, lot 338A. Request for parking variance under section 32-105G to have less than the required spaces and a sign variance under sections 32-112A subsection 4, sections 32-112D subsections 1 and 2, 32-1112E subsection 3, and 32-115 subsections A and B to exceed the allowable signage square footage in the business zoning district. We find that the hardship for both the parking variance is due to the unique characteristics of the subject land or structure. There's been some testimony given today that there's an easement, or actually a conjunction of an easement and a effort to increase the green space, which has reduced the available possible parking spaces, and that is not due to the and that's due rather to the characteristics of the surrounding area, and not due to the physical or economic disability of the applicant. What I'm going to do is I'm going to run through the parking, and then I'm going to run through it all with the signs. We find that in regards to the parking variance, the hardship is not the result of any prior action of the applicant and does not result primarily from the desire to realize greater financial gain. As just stated, when you have to consider the easement as well as the requirements for increasing the green space, neither of which are the prior action of the applicant. That is what is creating the hardship in allowing to have the appropriate amount of spaces. The granting of the variance will not alter the general, in regards to parking, will not alter the general character of the surrounding area, and the request conforms to the purpose and intent of the Warren zoning ordinance and comprehensive plan. Again, in regards to parking, we find that this is a new business coming to town that is redeveloping a parcel. They're trying to make it nicer looking, more economically friendly with the green space, and trying to fit as many parking spaces in as they can. We find that that is compatible with what Warren wants to do in balancing, maintaining the general aesthetics of the area while improving the business usability. We find that the relief requested is the least relief necessary when it comes to parking. Again, there's been testimony taken that the proposed parking spaces are the maximum amount that they could squeeze in with this. And if this variance were not to be granted in regards to parking, we find that the hardship would be more than a mere inconvenience in that they just wouldn't be able to have the right amount of parking spaces. It would be in violation of the ordinance. And as stated previously, a lot of this is not, that's due from the pre-existing easement, as well as the requirements to increase green space. When it comes to specific regards to parking, we find that the ordinance requires 35 spaces and what is proposed is 26, and thus the applicant is requesting a relief of 9 parking spaces for the AutoZone project.
If I could just interject, I think we're going to memorialize that the site as a whole, including the CVS, given that it's a joint ownership, requires how many parking spaces in total by the ordinance?
25.
You're having, how many would we're having 25 less than what the whole property would have required to start with. 88. And so you're going to have how many in total for both sites? 68, so that's a difference of 20, right? Does the 5 handicap count towards your requirements?
Actually, I'm sorry.
No, scratch.
5 handicap is a note that they exist, not additional parking spaces.
Oh, so you have 88, or I mean, you need 88, you have 63.
Correct.
Which includes 5 handicap.
That's correct.
So you have a difference of 25.
That is also.
All right, so we're going to memorialize that these 2 parcels as a whole have a deficiency of 25 spaces.
Okay. And I think that's it for the parking. Moving on to signs. Again, we'll restate that the existing pylon sign is just being refaced. So as far as total square footage, we're going to be looking primarily at the facade sign. We find that the hardship to this building is due to the unique characteristics of the subject land or structure, and not to the general characteristics of the surrounding area, and not due to the physical or economic disability of the applicant. Again, we've heard some testimony today that the existing building, I believe, is going to be raised and a new building is going to be constructed as requested by the planning board to keep it in a more of a colonial style. And having been shown the digital rendering of what the building is going to look like, there's really no other place to put this sign and have it scaled appropriately. We find that the hardship is not the result of any prior action of the applicant. It does not result primarily from the desire to realize greater financial gain. Again, this is a new business coming on, and the front-facing sign, which will be east-facing only, is going to be a new sign on this new building. The granting of the variance will not alter the general character of the surrounding area. The request conforms to the purpose and intent of the Warren zoning ordinance and comprehensive plan. Again, this is in the business district. Internally illuminated signs are allowed. Having been showed the digital rendering of what the AutoZone is going to look like from the street, it's going to be very similar to some of the other businesses that are already in the area. I'll specifically cite the Advanced Auto Parts, Dunkin' Donuts pretty much across the street, the McDonald's and the Burger King. And thus it is compatible with the existing land uses. And again, the Warren zoning ordinance wants to encourage new businesses coming in, and they're doing what they can in the business district. We find the relief requested is the least relief necessary for the front-facing sign. Again, having been shown the digital rendering, the sign is appropriately scaled to the building. If it were any smaller, it may be difficult to see it adequately from the road, especially given that this is the only sign physically on the building, which would be facing east. And if the variance were not to be granted, we find that the hardship would be more than a mere inconvenience in that they may not be allowed to have any sort of front-facing signage, which would be difficult for them. Going over the numbers. The facade sign, what is allowed in this zone is 20 square feet. What is proposed is 90, and thus the variance sought is 70 feet. As an additional condition, we will note that the hours of operation for these signs will be time restricted for both the pylon and the front-facing sign, and that as far as the advertising signs may be turned on when business begins, and they can be left on a maximum of 30 minutes after the posted closing time.
I would add to the condition that the restriction on the lighting for the pylon sign applies to the auto zone portion of the sign. I would also add that the parking lot lighting, as discussed with the planning board, will be dark sky compliant. We'll also add the condition that the parking lot lighting be capable of achieving multiple lighting levels such that when the building is not occupied, the parking lot lighting and any other lighting attached to the building for safety and security will be reduced to a level appropriate for the security of the building, but below the level which would be employed when customers and staff are actively using the building. Other conditions or amendments?
Oh, just that this approval is conditional on
yes.
a final approval by the planning board and the zoning official.
Okay. And the securing of all required permits from DEM, DOT, compliance with all relevant building and fire codes, and any other regulations that are applicable to this site. Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The application is approved.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Cox. Have a good evening, and hopefully we can move forward expeditiously with your project.
My apologies for holding you up. I do.
No, it
appreciate
was
your-
no hold up at
How
all.
do you
You're
do,
right.
Yeah, you never told us.
Very poorly, because here's what happened. We were actually very much in the hunt and we're doing very well. Until we got to the last corner when the guy was allowed to slide, which is the one line that holds the one corner of the spinnaker. And we ended up having all the control lines for the spinnakers, the colorful sails out front of the dead white, out over there in about 18 knots of wind and only a halyard attached. So what you do when that happens is you stay into the wind and lower your spinnaker as much as you can so it gets in the water so you can then turn and chase it, because if you try to chase it with it all the way up, you'll never catch it. So be up there.
Very good. We have one final.
Show some compassion.
There's one final matter here, and the solicitor can update us on discussion of, public records requests regarding what is appropriate for email communications of the board.
I can address that. There are security concerns that we have with our internal email. Let's say the security concerns. That there are embedded security concerns that it's not gonna happen. From your perspective, or from the town's perspective, we're not gonna, for town employees, there's a collective requirement from the If we open it up to the zoning board, we have to open it up to the conservation board, we have to open it up.
Why wouldn't you doing town business? Why should they put their personal privacy in place?
I mean, I would suggest if this is something.
It is something.
I finish my statement.
Sure.
This is something that this group wants to put forward. You put this forward as a formal request.
We can certainly,
The solicitor or I can answer, but.
we can certainly
It wasn't meant for you to-
put forth.
It was meant to go to. them.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
can.
and the formal request will be to the town council. There's plenty of time to get down on these subjects.
Yeah, we can draft a memo. Because I think the concern is that when discovery happens in a lawsuit, they could potentially subpoena Google to rifle through all of our
I'm
personal
not disputing
emails.
any of that. I mean,
It's a major concern.
no one has the discretion here to make that decision. I think the solicitor is going to have to offer an opinion to the town council as to how appropriate that is.
Can we hear the
Some
solicitor's
communities
opinion?
allow that,
Can we hear the
some
solicitor's
communities
opinion? Can we hear the solicitor's opinion?
don't. He's-
Yeah.
Okay.
What I'll do now is, if you can make a formal motion, you'll have to look into it legally and then make recommendations to the council based on what the board wants to see done.
It has to be a formal request of
Yeah.
town council for the solicitor to entertain.
Yeah, so I can, we can make a motion and then I will draft a memo to be submitted to the town council expressing our concerns, particularly with regard to discovery during lawsuits and the availability of subpoenas being issued for personal email accounts which belong to Google or whatever service provider you happen to use. So would someone like to make a motion to that effect?
I would like to make that motion.
Okay, and is there a second on that motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Thank you.
Any opposed?
Let me just add, I totally understand, I'm myself, we have a situation in town where somebody wants all my emails for the last 5 years. That's a forensic expert. I mean, I don't oppose what you're doing, but I do think that the town is going to give you the protection of the town email. But
It's for town business.
It's for your protection
So
of your personal email.
So the purpose of this would be to conduct town business
I
using
understand that,
town email
But then, I think.
wholeheartedly. So now
But I
the
think
town
that the problem
itself
is that
would have the ability to manage that,
what we don't
to
have. the
make sure
ability to
people
manage
are,
that.
well, to be quite frank, then, that's unfortunate for the town, that we don't have the ability to monitor how our
The
town
state doesn't
employees
have the
use.
ability to manage, you work for the state.
I do work for the state, and
But
they
if you,
do manage.
if you send
and
an
they
email
do
to
do-
somebody that is outside of the realm, right? Once you sent that email is out.
No, but
point
the
is
state
that the
has-
state Has the ability to.
If
manage
someone
that.
subpoenas the state, they have access to those records.
I just
It's so
recommend you.
I would recommend when you type it up, listen to the town manager, yes, and CC me on it, this way I can get ahead of it. And respond